Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. And because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused, and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household, and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried out. He left his garment beside me, and fled, and got out of the house." Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house." As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison, but the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed.
In this chapter, we read about how Joseph was mistreated by his brothers and thrown into slavery because he was chosen by God to rule over his brothers, and their jealousy was sparked against him. He was sold into slavery and bought by Potiphar. Joseph served under Potiphar, and he did such a great job that Potiphar didn't even consider the things that he had or what he possessed, because God was with him in everything that he did, Joseph did not become discouraged because he was sold into slavery. Instead, he worked as though he was working for the Lord. He worked with diligence and he worked righteously. And because of it, God had blessed him extremely. Now, Joseph could have moped and wept the whole time he was there. He could have done a horrible job. He could have refused to work because he was treated unfairly. But he refused to let his situation and his circumstances cause him to forget of the dream and the vision that God had gave him a long time ago, that he would become a ruler one day. God had also made Joseph an attractive man, and so much so that even Potiphar's wife cast longing eyes upon him, and she lusted for him. He was a hard worker, and he was diligent in all that he did, and he was righteous. And this woman wanted to cause him to commit adultery with her, which God had blessed Joseph so much that if he were to do that, he would have destroyed the righteous spirit that God had placed inside of him. This is a tactic the enemy likes to do to Christians a lot, which is to cause them to be moved out of the way by a lustful spirit, by a woman or a man who is walking in the spirit of lust, to cause you to destroy the righteous works that you have been doing, so that you are then punished by God because you give in to an adulterous behavior. You see, part of being righteous is to resist all things that are wrong in the eyes of the Lord. Yes, Joseph could have given himself over to this because that was his master's wife, and he listened to her command and to what she wanted. But instead, Joseph stuck to what he knew his God was pleased with. And because of this, he ran out the house naked, with her standing there with his clothes in her hand. And she had no way to explain this but to say that this man tried to attack her and to humiliate her. And that is why the Hebrew was inside of the Egyptian's house working so hard, which is a complete and utter lie, and all people know it who have read this story. The worst part is Potiphar believed his wife instead of believing Joseph. Though all the hard work that he has done and as diligent as he has been, he believed his wife that she was telling the truth, instead of knowing for a fact that his wife was an adulterous wife that tried to betray him and instead have persecuted Joseph, though he did no wrong. Potiphar becomes enraged with Joseph and he throws him in the prison, yet this also does not discourage Joseph. Instead, as he is in the prison, God is with him and he is still blessed beyond all people in Egypt at this time. And just as he was in Potiphar's house, where he was diligent in his work, so much so that Potiphar had exalted him and promoted him and put all things in charge of his hand and worried about nothing while he handled his other business, the prison guards, the prison keeper did the same exact thing for Joseph, the same exact blessing, because Joseph was wrongly persecuted at both times. He was wrongly attacked. Though he did no wrong, they had came against him and had persecuted the innocent, have condemned the innocent. But God did not allow the innocent to be condemned. He justified him. He stayed with him, even though the whole world was turning against Joseph. The life of Joseph is a good example of what it means to walk in righteousness, to resist evil, and temptations, and to trust in God, and to not allow yourself to be moved out of the way so that your works will be destroyed because of lust or any type of sin. It is an example of what it means to not be discouraged when God has told you something, given you a dream or a vision, and yet you have not seen it come to pass. And instead, what you have seen come to pass is a bunch of misery and a bunch of things that seem to be opposite of what the dream is that you received. Joseph's story is one of hope and inspiration, and may we also learn how to trust in God the way that Joseph did, and to go through the sufferings and to not become discouraged, and to continue to work as though we are working for the Lord under any circumstances, knowing that God is faithful and He will judge righteously one day on our behalf, if we will continue to believe in Him and not give up our faith.